Good afternoon. Welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. My name is Drew Clark. I'm the CEO of Broadband Breakfast. Today, we're going to be talking about gigabit applications and the importance of those kinds of high bandwidth applications. Probably don't hear quite as much about this topic as we have in recent years, but it's kind of a near and dear one to my heart. And I know several of the people that we'll be hearing from just now as well. And we're very excited for our panel of experts that will be with us shortly. But before I turn to that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor. We appreciate the support of each of our sponsors. And today we want to acknowledge Ookla, a global leader in connectivity intelligence, which brings together the trusted expertise of speed test, down detector, Ekahau, and root metrics. That's speed test, down detector, Ekahau, and root metrics to deliver unmatched network and connectivity insights. By combining multi-source data with industry-leading expertise, Ookla transforms network performance metrics into strategic, actionable insights. Learn more at Ookla, ookla.com. That's Ookla, ookla.com. Thank you to Ookla and all of our sponsors. We're going to be talking, as I just said, about gigabit speeds or applications that use gigabit speeds. But before I do that, I just want to take a minute to remind everyone about Broadband Breakfast. We are a news and events community centered around better broadband, better lives. We report every day on America's broadband build out, as well as the tools and techniques and education that are needed to make sure that's an effective build out. We also host quarterly events. We did one about a month ago on resilient critical infrastructure. We also have done others on the Speeding Bead Summit, on data centers, nuclear power, and broadband, on our annual Digital Infrastructure Investment Summit on the financing for digital infrastructure. So these in-person events in Washington are part of what we do, but then we also do these free events every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. We've been doing this for 5.5 years since the pandemic hit upon us, and this was a way to bring people together online. We still do that, and we also, of course, publish about 10 to 15 stories every day, news stories focused on better broadband, better lives. And I guess finally, I should say, we've really been pleased to launch in the last few weeks and months the community, the interactive community on chat.broadbandbreakfast.com. As long as you're logged in with your free or your paid broadband breakfast membership, you'll be able to see the community at chat.broadbandbreakfast.com. There's discussion points, there's glossary, there's video explainers, and videos, links to highlights of Broadband Breakfast live online events from recent weeks and months, and it's of course updated every week. So we've just kind of been welcoming people into the community and certainly encourage discussion. Your Q&A from this event will be posted there on the page for the Broadband Breakfast Live Online. And we certainly want to hear from you as you comment and engage with the reporting we do. And I also just take a moment to say that we're grateful for the support of sponsors. We're also grateful for the members of the Broadband Breakfast Club, and we really do need your support to sustain and to grow Broadband Breakfast. We're a vital voice for independent reporting and bringing people together. We're not part of any major media company or conglomerate, and we look to you all as those who engage with us and who participate in these free weekly events to make a contribution by becoming a member of the Broadband Breakfast Club. It's $99 a month or $490 a year for broadband community members like all of you, and we hope you'll consider subscribing and becoming a member today. with that, let's go ahead and open up our view to each of our participants in the discussion today. As I said just at the top, we're going to be talking about applications for gigabit connectivity. And we've really just got four very esteemed voices in this field. We obviously do a great variety of topics with doing one a week. You know, we're doing more than 50 a year, and we cover everything from energy to digital inclusion, AI, social media. We strive for a diversity of viewpoints as well as backgrounds. And we certainly are pleased to have the people we have here for today's discussion. So let me just go ahead and introduce them. We're going to, in the order they'll speak, we're going to hear first from Jimmy Schaeffler. Jimmy's a very active commentator on Broadband Breakfast Live online events. So thank you, Jimmy. Glad to put you on the other end of the camera today. Jimmy's the chairman and CSO of the Carmel Group. As in that role, where he's based in Scottsdale, Arizona, for more than 3 decades, he has researched, analyzed, and written about telecom, pay TV, broadcast, and digital media issues. So we're excited to hear first from Jimmy after I introduce the other panelists. Thanks for being on this end of the camera. He's going to be followed by Bob Whitman. We're excited to have Bob bringing his perspective from as Vice President of Market and Product Strategy at Corning Optical Communications. And he has more than 25 years experience in optical fiber network infrastructure, architecture, product development, and carrier engagement. He's developed commercial and technical expertise in all aspects of optical communications. And before joining Corning in '97, he was a nuclear power engineer officer in the U.S. Navy. So thanks for your service and nuclear power. We've been talking a lot about on Broadband Breakfast lately. So I'm glad you bring additional expertise. Glenn, I've known for years. We were practically neighbors for many years when he and I were both kind of partially involved in Utah Ignite, which was in some ways an offshoot of US Ignite, his main gig. He's the founder and CTO of US Ignite, and he's recognized for many more things than that. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Utah's Cowlert School of Computing. And one of the things that I'm familiar with, I think you got this soon around the time we met. You're a pioneer member of the Internet Hall of Fame for creating the first internet exchange point. So he not only kind of knows the propeller head stuff, but he's really actively engaged in making it happen. And I know that from my experience in Utah. So glad we could get you on the program, Dr. Reichart. And then rounding up the concluding role will be Dr. William Lair, Bill Lair, a research affiliate at MIT. Again, our interaction goes back years. Bill, I participated in some early broadband census events that we had when we were broadband census and focused on collecting data. Now we have the community. We also have data. We collect and publish data for our Breakfast Club members. But anyway, a little bit about Dr. Lair. He's a telecom and internet industry economist and consultant with more than 30 years experience. He regularly advises senior industry executives and policymakers in the US and abroad on the market, industry, and policy implications of the internet ecosystem. And he's a research affiliate in the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT, where he's engaged in a number of multidisciplinary projects on economics and internet infrastructure. So really a wonderful wealth of expertise from our panelists. Let's turn it over to each of them in the order I laid out for 5-minute opening remarks before we have a round robin with my questions and the questions that we will have from our participants. So Jimmy, the floor is yours.
3 years ago for Multi-Channel News, the Carmel Group wrote an article that metaphorically compared everyone in America having fiber to everyone being required to drive a 200-mile-per-hour Corvette Stingray only on an expensive 6-lane concrete highway, while quite adequate and inexpensive, easier to repair Ford, Chevys, and VW Bugs were being forced from those roads, and there were no hybrids. In the years since, that metaphor has led the Carmel Group to what we call some broadband givens. Note too here, we define broadband throughput as how much data the system is capable of carrying, and broadband speed as how quickly the data is delivered. For these broadband speed and throughput questions here, these are those givens. And Drew, if you could put the first slide up, that would be wonderful. Given
Great. Just
number
give me a
one,
quick moment and we'll do that. Yeah, I mean, you can keep talking, but
given number one, America's gold standard when it comes to ultra high speed broadband content delivery is fiber. Given number two, fiber speeds will become more mainstream. Given three, competitive businesses like medicine, education, entertainment, and cloud computing will push for higher speeds. Given four, America wishes, on poles or on the ground, to physically build fiber everywhere. Given five, fiber cannot be built and cannot work everywhere. Given six, America cannot physically, as in financially, afford to build fiber everywhere. This may hold true for many years to come, and fiber everywhere is unlikely to ever occur. Given seven, in America today, all these facts I just listed above leave gaps that will be filled by alternative broadband providers. Given eight, Americans love choices, and the best of American capitalism supports and provides business and consumer choices. Given nine, in America today, the only other three broadband choices are major wireless content providers, one in the form of LEO and GEO satellites and their wireless content sent from above, and the other two in the form of ground-based fixed and mobile wireless or cellular internet service providers. And given number 10, because of the two-way dialogue offered by digital media, it is slowly taking away market share from mostly one-way content distributors like broadcast, direct broadcast satellite, and cable. With this playing field, a big question for this broadband breakfast forum today becomes, in terms of speed and throughput, in order to maintain viable businesses, can wireless providers keep up? That is the bottom line here, and it recommends a solution.
let me just, sorry to jump in, Jimmy. I'm highlighting the broadband uses green chart. Do you want that one
It's
to
actually
stay
the
up?
blue. It's actually the blue chart, please,
All right.
first.
Okay.
And I'm going to go on, Drew.
Go ahead.
Assuming these three core wireless providers, mobile, satellites, and fixed wireless, can keep up, how does this audience, as an individual, as a household, or as a business, measure what will work for today and tomorrow for the broadband systems they choose? The Carmel Group's answer to that pressing question is simply every audience member or their organization needs to develop and use a formula or a methodology. That would be a formal process that takes into account individual measurements, such as the type of uses, the terrain, the location, the budgets and affordability, regional support, system capabilities, and a few other important data points. And then from that formula, or even call it that algorithm, broadband users pick the broadband system with the best value. That could be satellite, fiber, fixed, or mobile wireless. Or it could be that holy grail of millions of systems today, a hybrid broadband system or system provider. Summing up, creators need to build a model that measures and rates various criteria. Then, as a broadband consumer, you run your broadband system choices and offerings through that model, perhaps as you would when buying a car. What do you want? What can you afford? Put another way, build and use different automobiles based on the terrain and the road you build. And again, that might include those systems that include that magic six-letter word hybrid, HYBRID systems. Concluding, may I add a couple more of what I will call tiny Corey stories. They involve two ideas I borrowed from my 39-year-old son. First is the importance of download speed from a customer point of view, which I learned 10 years ago when Corey worked at the content distribution network called Akamai. If content doesn't load quickly enough, typically in 2 to 4 seconds, users will go elsewhere. And Drew, if you could put the second green chart in now, that would be great. Second is the fact that today, Fox and Disney are choosing hyper personalization of the browser experience, especially for ads, which is all tied back to data and the digital streaming of broadband, which most broadcasters cannot do. And arguably, standard cable and standard satellite TV service cannot offer that personalization either. So, downloads have to be fast and systems need to be two-way. Applied on a larger field in any given household or at any given business, users will expect video to be delivered seamlessly, even with several high definition movies running at the same time in the same household. That same high standard applies to users of gaming content and to most businesses. It just has to work. On the other hand, physically, as in money, and in terms of physics, wireless can do a lot that fiber cannot do. The only question is, will wireless be enough and for how long? Finally, in summary, to the Carmel Group, at this point in American broadband storyline, the ultimate question is everyone must ask, how much can you afford when it comes to buying the future? Recapping, the answer lies in a model that everyone from a single elderly person living alone in a tiny studio apartment to the world's largest organizations must participate in. In order to get the most forward-leaning value from their broadband, they need to do an analysis of what they need and what they can afford. Thank you, Drew.
All right, let's turn right to our next guest, Bob Whitman. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And that was very interesting. Thank you, Jimmy. The only thing I would add to what Jimmy said is there's a lot of talk about wireless and capabilities. A wireless network today is essentially a fiber network with antennas on the end. In order to do the things Jimmy stated, all those antennas need to be fed with fiber. So I'll leave that part with the rest of you. As Drew mentioned, I'm 28 years with Corning. I've been working on fiber broadband since the beginning in the early 2000s. I was one of the people who found the Fiber to the Home Council, now known as the Fiber Broadband Association. I'm back on the board of directors there as of last year. And so I'm passionate about the broadband industry. I've been working on it for essentially my whole career, and happy to be here to add some comments. As Corning, we are the inventor of optical fiber and a leader in passive optical solutions in fiber broadband, and now part of AI infrastructure. So thank you, Drew, for inviting us. Appreciate a seat at the table.
So, Bob, do you have any particular thoughts that you would share with us up front here about, applications of the future, strongly demanded applications, or really kind of why high capacity networks are so important?
Well, AI requires fiber, right? So this part of this topic here is all about AI and broadband, and the infrastructure needed to provide the necessary communication is going to be on a fiber backbone. Mm-hmm. So in terms of applications, I'm sure we'll get into more detail, but any application that requires higher bandwidth and lower latency is going to be run on a fiber network.
All right. Appreciate your perspective here. Let's turn to Dr. Glenn Reichert. The floor is yours here.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me just quickly say show here. I've got a little presentation I put together.
Hey, Glenn, just while you're doing that, Jimmy, I'm going to kill the quiet time real quick. The answer before to the question about fiber being part of a fixed wireless system, that is a total acceptance. I totally support that. But my idea is that is the holy grail. That is the hybrid system that I think is the ideal. Go ahead, Glenn.
I'm going to ask if the next person can go, and I will figure out what's wrong here.
Great. And Glenn, if you need to email them to us so we can share, we can do that too. So if it's okay with you, Dr. Lair, let's turn to you and hope we can roll with the, be flexible here. So go ahead, Dr. Lair.
Sure. So it's a pleasure to be here, and certainly a big thanks to Drew and Broadband Breakfast for basically contributing and keeping me up to date on so many great topics, and also to my co-panelists in the audience for having the opportunity to engage on these topics. As Drew explained, I'm an economist that sits in the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence lab. So the economists always have two hands. So whatever you say, I'm always there to say, yeah, but there's this other perspective. So do we need fiber everywhere? We need lots of more fiber. We need lots more of everything. I think the vision that we've been trying to build towards is towards the critical infrastructures, digital infrastructures that will allow us to participate as citizens, as businesses, as a country, as first-class citizens in a digital economy. We're rapidly moving towards that, and what that means is the ability to sort of augment potentially every task we engage in our daily lives with digital resources. And with the introduction of ChatGPT in November 2022, that sort of leapt into the public consciousness of something that's been coming for decades, of the fact that this is actually something that we could begin to see could actually happen. We're far from being able to do that, but that vision, ultimately, that future vision of pervasive computing, is one of everything, everywhere, always has the potential to be augmented by digital resources on demand. So machine to machine, human to machine, whatever sort of way you want to do that, however you're moving, doing it aware or unaware. That vision, is sort of the thing that the people in the technology community at every level, from the chips to the networks to the services, has been trying to build towards in various ways, and also competitively. With ChatGPT now, we recognize that whoa, that AI future for some people is sort of like, it has huge potential, but also they're saying, is everything about that going to be great? It really highlights the fact that people want to have choices in how they connect, where they connect, when they connect, and what they do there. And so that what we're talking about here is, we certainly need better infrastructure, so that the infrastructure is not the gatekeeper or constraining the potential to realize all the wonderful things that AI has the potential of delivering, and sort of the next generation of digital technology could potentially deliver, to address climate change, better health applications, better support for all kinds of things. Whatever it is you want to do, there is a digital story about how digital technology can make things better. And certainly faster speeds are a critical component of that vision. But obviously, not all applications have the same requirements for performance requirements. And as the speeds get faster, the speeds that you can take advantage of get faster, then other performance requirements like latency, availability, or trustability become much, much more important and loom to the fore. And figuring out exactly what you mean by, and the best way to deal with latency, or the way to deal with something like availability, reliability, or trustability, becomes much, much more complicated, and a very diverse and heterogeneous and complex industry structure with lots of different players, from the chips to the final services, is important in sort of moving us towards that. If we focus just on speed, the key question is, for who, where, and when. Every community in America, I think, needs high-speed connectivity to wide area networks today, and that needs to be gigabit speeds or higher, and in almost all cases it should be fiber, so that if your community, or you're not within 5 miles of something that has fiber, that's a problem, and that's a national problem, and it's a problem that we've been trying and recognize we have to debate, certainly since COVID. It really made that apparent. And so every local government and anchor institutions like libraries, schools, and hospitals, need that. Businesses need it today, gigabit speeds today, but mostly they're going to try and self-provision that. And the future of what they're going to be doing is more of a hybrid environments, where they're mixing their own private and public cloud infrastructures. They want the capabilities and services. And it's not a question of should there be intelligence in the core or the edge. There should be intelligence everywhere. You need computes at the edge, but the more computes you have at the edge, the more compute you'll need in the core because the two drive each other. For consumers, and I think a lot of what we're interested in today is talking about that. Today, few consumers really need gigabit speeds. And even when it's available, most of them don't want to buy it. And those that do buy it don't really fully use the capacity. So the decision about do they need fiber today that can offer gigabit speeds is, well, fiber can significantly improve the value of their houses. And if they're building new stuff, they certainly ought to future-proof it because putting in wired infrastructure is really expensive. And they ought to think and plan ahead for not just the fiber capabilities, but also the capabilities of increased electric power and all that sort of stuff. But their action or what they'll need is going to depend on all the other parts of the value chain. And so I think it's a much more complicated question that's going to be clearly gated by the prices of the service. If it's cheap enough, why wouldn't I get a better service? But today, right now, for example, I live in Concord, Massachusetts. My fiber to the home provider is our local municipal utility, which goes back to Thomas Edison, because I live in Concord, Massachusetts. And I don't subscribe to the gigabit service because there isn't anything that I do today that would notice a difference if I did subscribe to it relative to what I currently do. Most of the problems that people experience in throughput or latency today are more typically not a function of their broadband connection, but a function of how they've got their home network configured, what applications they're using, all that sort of stuff. So let me stop there.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lair. And let's go ahead and switch over to Glenn. Were you able to get the screen share?
So I'm going to try to click this on here.
Excellent.
And
there we go.
It
all
worked.
right. So do gigabit speeds matter? So I'm the founder and CTO of US Ignite. It's my 5th startup. It's a nonprofit startup, and it's just entering its teenage years here. Are you seeing one slide, or are you seeing one slide and a next slide?
Just one slide. The whole
Perfect.
screen has been, yeah.
Perfect. So this gives you just a picture of the staff at US Ignite. We work closely with communities. We work with some military bases when they allow us to do things that cities might not allow us to do in terms of advanced technology. Startups and researchers in academia to go and bring technology solutions to communities. And an important part of that is to make sure that we do it in a way that fosters civic trust. We've discovered that, despite the best technologies, if you don't have the trust of the community, it's not going to work. And in fact, we have a whole book about fostering civic trust that you can get from our website. As I said, our programs are on communities bases. And we also are the National Science Foundation's organization, which manages their platforms for advanced wireless research. It's a $100 million public-private partnership, and we have 4 large-scale wireless test beds that drive U.S. innovation and competitiveness across the United States. You can ask me questions about that if you'd like to know more. So why gigabit? Well, there's a bunch of known answers, and I think you've already heard them from the other panelists. Could be large households, many devices, remote work, online gaming and VR is certainly pushing the technology. Smart home technology is taking more and more bandwidth. And of course, content creations. But do gigabit speeds matter? Well, the interesting thing is that consumers are actually saying so. OpenVault has reported that more than half of internet users now have gigabit connections. If you have a connection, more than half of those people have a gigabit or better connection. And the average download speed here in 2025 is over half a gigabit already. So very interesting. Now, I take a look at this and I compare it to how things have grown. This is over the past 50 years, I've been graphing how much speed I can get from my home, or from a typical home, we'll say, to the internet. And you can see on the left, we've got a logarithmic scale there with kilobits at the left in the 1970s, megabits, gigabits, and terabits at the top. And the typical speeds that you would find from my friends and neighbors are represented by the blue dots there. And that goes from dial-up in the 70s and 80s, cable, 90s and 2000s. Some of the wireless came in and pushed the speed limits there. And of course, fiber offers us some of the best speeds available right now. I will not argue with anyone who says we can match it with wireless or with other technologies, but I think that fiber has probably the greatest growth potential, so I put it in there. Now, the red dot is kind of the best that you can buy. And of course, most people don't buy the best that you can buy, but you can see in the blue dots what that is. And that is a straight line for the past 50 years. Now, if Gordon Moore can say that the number of transistors doubles every 2 years and call it Moore's law, I'm going to call it Reichert's law, that the growth is doubles every 3 years. And if you take a look at doubling every 3 years from 50 over the past 50 years, it's a remarkably straight line. The dots are not exactly on the line, but I think it's a pretty good prediction. Now, like Moore's law, which might turn over because we may not be able to cram so many transistors on a chip, maybe we're not going to be able to keep this growth going, but it's an awfully good track record. And my guess is that the track record might hold because we might have some terabit applications. So let me talk about not gigabit, but terabit applications. So this is the new front slide. We've been thinking about terabit applications for years. I went to a workshop in 2007 in California, and the topic of that 2007 conference was terabit applications. What are they? What is needed to enable them? A terabit success story just recently is that the Vera Rubin Observatory, the new observatory in Peru, is now connected to the United States with a connection of 6.71 terabits per second in order to get the very detailed information that it's looking at from the skies to the scientific community. So we're already got terabit applications in science. This is the Fabric terabit core network in yellow that you can see here. This is from the National Science Foundation. 23 of us wrote a paper to the Science Foundation, it must be about 6 years ago, saying we really need a terabit test bed. The National Science Foundation ended up funding it. And it's called Fabric is its name, and it has connections to a lot of other places. That terabit network is now in the process of being connected globally around the world. So, and science is using it. It's got a lot of people who are using it in ways that are very interesting and unusual, but I don't have time for all of those. When we get to terabit, we can get one of two things, or really both, or some combination of both. One is more bandwidth. A terabit allows us to put more cars on the road, more bits on the line, but it also has lower latency because the bits are transmitted more quickly. So each message takes less time to send than it did before that higher speed. And I would say that I'm beginning to notice the second effect even more than the first effect. So under the Moore data, to go back to the first one, we can get very high resolution images and movies now, but we could get even more accurate colors and realism, more accurate images, more detailed images. And I would think that we're going to see more 3D video with a user selection of perspective to be able to see it. So that's the more data, the left-hand track part, the more cars. On the right-hand side, where we had fewer cars, just one car, reduced latency means that we can do faster than human decision-making, true real-time interaction, distributed competitions and performances, virtual teleportation, vehicle-to-vehicle coordination, and remote surgery. Let's take a look at one of those. This is an example of where platooning is possible by having high-speed communications between vehicles. The latency is important because if the front vehicle sees there's something on the road, they must all brake equally at the same time in order to avoid crashing into each other because they're following very closely to minimize the air resistance. So that's an application where very low latency, very reliable communications is needed. So it's applications like those that I think are going to really be the ones that are going to be driving us in the future. Those are the terabit applications, Drew.
Thank you so much. And let's go ahead and change the view. If you could stop the sharing there.
Sure.
And we will be in our side-by-side view as speakers, hopefully here, as soon as we...
Now I need to go to my Zoom. And I need to tell Zoom, come on, Zoom.
Let's see if I can just disable that. All right, thank you. So that was great. And no, but now we lost Glenn. So let's see if Ari could work to get him back. I hope I didn't click a wrong button. But that was a fabulous presentation, and really appreciate Glenn Reichert going over all of those aspects of what not just gigabit networks, but as we just heard, terabit networks. So thanks also to our audience that's putting a bunch of questions, in the Q&A for us to use. And I will say as well that while Glenn was talking, I put a link to an article that I wrote 10 years ago about this this topic. Okay, Glenn, you're back. Sorry if I inadvertently booted you out, but I was just saying it's so exciting to see the discussion about not just gigabit, but terabit applications. And I think, again, we've kind of, the table set a little bit here with those who are saying, yeah, we really need to be leaning into these, and others who are saying, not so much, right? I mean, the constraint that Bill Lair identified is less his home connection and more the routers. And likewise, Jimmy talked about these. And we had a little discussion about what is a hybrid network. Is a hybrid network really a fiber network with some kind of additional sharing? But let's actually let our panelists first respond to other panelists. So Jimmy and Bob and Bill, if you'd respond to Glenn or add anything to the points he's made about the need for these high bandwidth applications.
Yeah,
go
I'd
ahead,
like to
Bob.
go first. Thank you.
Let's go Bob first. Yeah.
So I heard a couple of things, and I really did enjoy that presentation as well. I heard about competition a little bit, and that fiber maybe doesn't get everywhere. I just want to throw a couple of statistics out. So today, more than half the country, close to 80 million homes, have a fiber provider in those communities. Not everybody signed up to the fiber provider, but about 80 million homes have access to a fiber provider. And even though Dr. Lair doesn't subscribe to the gigabit service, he has the ability to subscribe if he chooses to. About 15-ish% of homes that have a fiber provider have a second fiber provider in their community. So they're already offering gigabit speeds to compete with each other, in some cases multi-gigabit speeds. So it is becoming mainstream to offer a gigabit service. And there's competition for that gigabit service that will continue to grow. So I just wanted to share a few comments there. I did appreciate everybody else's thoughts, but we're getting to the point where we're reaching peak years of deployment for fiber-based broadband of more than 10 million homes a year over the next several years. So we're going to get it out to almost everybody.
Right. Anyone else want to react? Go ahead, Bill.
Yep, sure. So first off, I don't think anybody said anything I disagree with, because none of you guys are actually really disagreeing with each other. I think we've all agreed that fiber is the technology for the future, and certainly if you're talking about new builds, it makes sense, because it gets you the future proofing. Glenn, gives us a vision that is, practical applications that are the sort of things that pervasive computing is trying to build us towards. And AI will make that even more possible. And with agentic AI and more user devices and all of this, that'll give more ability for users to sort of, in unaware, everywhere they go ways, to sort of stay to participate. Now, obviously, all of that technology, if it isn't controlled in the right kind of way, that's the worst vision of surveillance economy. And so some people tell horror stories of what the Chinese might do with that. For example, they could track everything you do everywhere, link it all together, and just have this unbelievable amount of data. So how we use it, one of the key issues is obviously going to be the questions about how the wireless and the fiber hook together. And also with respect to fiber, and Bob, you could talk about this too. Fiber is not a static thing. Corning has continued to innovate very, very significantly. And you don't just take a fiber and hook together with another fiber like we do with our electric power. There's a lot more complicated, and a lot more of that happens at sort of a local level. And so I think the questions of the architectures and thinking about how those architectures get integrated and who the players are is really important. And a lot of what I do is think about what the government's role in policy should be. So I wrote a paper and relied on work from Carmel Group on behalf of WISPA, taking exception to the original BEAD funding program that basically was targeted to only fund fiber projects. Now, the thing about fiber is that if you're building fiber to serve a single building and it's a mile, that is super expensive. And so that's a real hockey stick to get to those last locations. That doesn't say anything about where the fiber should be. There's tons of, like, the places where we need a lot more fiber, for example, is in urban areas and where we're going to see the overbuilds and that. This question about how much fiber we need in these sort of tail distributions, like communities that are really far off the grid, they should have fiber to the community, but do they need it to every building in the community? I personally think not. I think that's crazy. I also think that, like, when you think about things like overbuilding fiber into communities that already have good broadband infrastructure, that's something the communities ought to like for resiliency and all this sort of stuff. But if a second builder is going to come in, if they have to basically match the existing infrastructure, that's going to be really costly. And if they have to do it in a short time frame, that's going to be really costly. And the best build out model is probably one that allows them to flexibly integrate fiber and wireless. Maybe they use wireless for a period of time, or you use fiber and then use wireless. I got involved in a project 15, 20 years ago about, selling high capacity satellite channels on demand. And one of the key areas for customers was Palo Alto, which was one of the most wired places. And the reason was because when those companies moved offices from one fibered building to another fibered building, they couldn't be down at all. And they would pay any amount of money for a short period of time to have high capacity connectivity. So there are weird applications where these things complement each other. So I think this thing is the way these technologies complement each other.
We'll certainly get everyone in, but we want to start getting our questions from our audience. Brian Duffner asks or says, speed is nice, but can you speak to the role low latency plays in all of this? Who wants to tackle latency versus speed? Glenn, go ahead.
I think latency is the thing for the future that we need to worry about the most. We're getting a lot of bits out there, but can we get them there fast enough to be able to enable the next generation of applications, which I think will depend just as much on speed as on the ability to get the bits out there.
Okay. Dan Grossman also asks or says, if you do the math, speed is an insignificant component of latency. It was important in the kilobit and megabit days, but in the gigabit and terabit realm, it is insignificant relative to other components of end-to-end latency. Agree, disagree? Anyone else want to chime in on latency? It's okay.
That certainly becomes true. That certainly becomes true as you get further and further away.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say latency is super important, but if you look at what's happened with content delivery networks and distribution, you're going to have a mix of both fat and thin clients, and that's a really good idea. And any kind of device that really depends, like a UAV or an AV, that really depends on network connectivity, has to have a strategy for what happens when the connectivity isn't there. So even when the networks are 99.99% reliable and they have all the bandwidth they need, they'll also need to have a way to deal with whatever it is they have to deal with when it breaks, because if the thing really matters, it matters. And
Mhm.
so that, and you can look to things like what happened with the car industry. The car industry had a great opportunity to basically develop this, and they basically failed. So today, what do you want? Most people want like their smartphone to basically be the platform they use in their cars. Now that may change as we move to EVs, or it might not. The car industry's demonstrated an inability to sort of understand how to play in the IT world
Mhm.
for decades. And so I don't know if they're ever going to solve that.
Darcy Lawrence, I hope I got that name right, Darcy, uh, says that the previous slides, I think referring to Jimmy's slides, places gaming as the second highest using compared to streaming. And I think the question here is, how is the bandwidth kind of gobble upness or capacity use of gaming versus streaming? Last point Darcy makes, Netflix and other usual suspects in streaming usage are video on demand. While they consume mass amounts of capacity, they can tolerate latency, unlike gaming. Building on our latency point. Jimmy, why don't you weigh in on this discussion?
Well, not being an engineer, I'm not going to jump into that one. So I defer to the other experts on the panel. But the bottom line is like any other product out there, the standard rises more and more, higher and higher, and people reach a point where they've got to have a certain capacity and a certain quality. And I think gaming is going to be leading that for a long, long time. But the specific answer to his question, I'll let Glenn or Bill or Bob answer that.
Well, I'm going to throw in a question of my own, which is, what are the killer apps for gigabit and terabit networks? And Glenn, you've rattled off so many. I hesitate to say what is the killer app or the killer suite of apps. I mean, do you have any thoughts on what kinds of new, just like Uber and ride sharing in some ways was the killer app for 4G, for LTE, that really got people to appreciate the value of that higher connectivity. What are we going to get that gets people to appreciate, hey, I've got a gigabit at home and it's not even enough, right?
Yeah, I think the killer apps are going to be in the areas of continuous medical monitoring. I think that's going to be rather important to bring forward. I think that there's going to be a lot of work on making education not a school-only place or a school plus homework, but really bridge that gap where the school comes home with the technology that's available. I think there's going to be a lot more community building when people can not only go and visit their neighbors next door, but the ones who live 5, 6 doors down and make community decisions together by having basically meetings in their homes together. I think that churches are going to find ability to reach bigger audiences because they were able to take their technologies and bring them to people who couldn't otherwise make it to church. I think you can take about almost any topic and think about how that can be improved when you've got lower latency and more reach.
Others want to weigh in on this. Jimmy, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that a killer app that I see around the corner very readily is AI in a two-way audio video form. In other words, I talk into the screen, a meme comes up and instantly answers my questions in an AI context. Everybody's going to love that.
So on AI, maybe just to be a little skeptical here, right? Do we really need gigabit networks for, ChatGPT 5, right? I mean, the high bandwidth is kind of in the train, isn't it? I understand as we get to inference, we're going to need more, but what is the kind of physical needs of AI, at least as AI as consumers understand it? I mean, feel free to supplement and say, well, you're not thinking big enough, Drew. You got to think about the AI uses of the enterprise. What specifically do we know about the AI bandwidth needs?
Well,
Right now,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that most LLMs operate in one place and they have very high bandwidth within that one place. But I think the future is going to give us these LLMs talking to each other. And at that time, we're going to need to have a significant bandwidth between the LLMs and between the LLMs and the queryers. Back to you.
I mean, I'd agree with that, because I think the thing is that the key thing that the LLMs promise with real-time interactivity is the ability to take advantage of crowdsourced data and local data and then use the engines that exist. The computation of the engines is at a particular location. I think in addition to these killer apps, the other killer app is basically the cost and the price comes down, so that what road warriors at the most intensive places already have access to, those capabilities should be available to everybody everywhere. And to make that possible in the price, that means a lot more cheaper, more expensive ways and reconfigure it in competition at every level. So it's not just what you can do with it, it's who can do it.
Jimmy, did you want to weigh in on this too? Oh, Bob,
Yeah.
but please go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to add, security cameras. There'll be 30 million of them deployed in a year. They are now visual intelligence devices that are crunching data, determining, is that a bear or is that a person? And this is sort of the edge devices that are now implementing AI. Again, we're at the infancy. There are going to be plenty of ideas that come out that drive even more bandwidth for those.
Jimmy.
Yeah, Drew, real quickly, to my way of experiencing this and viewing it, right now we're in an AI world of text, and we are on our way to an AI world of audio, video, and more. And that's where the gigabit is going to be important.
Mm-hmm. We've got some great questions, and please put them in the Q&A tab. We'll try to get as many as we can over the next 8-9 minutes. This question kind of has many forms, but I think Michael Pitch has asked about the 1930s. The American Association of Railroads opposed widespread electrification, and it got a second follow-up comment saying that extension of electricity to rural areas and underserved areas was not a priority for them. This sentiment reflected broader concerns that electricity was seen as a tool for economic gain rather than a universal public good. I just want to see if anyone wants to weigh in on, like, have we, with changes that the Trump administration has made to BEAD, quote unquote, deprioritizing fiber. Obviously, fiber is still accounting for about 67% of locations under the projections for the final proposals that have come in under the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. But does anyone want to kind of speak to, are we beginning to go back to a world where we discount the need for rural America to have the highest capabilities for their broadband? Bill?
First of all, I think that with respect to what the infrastructure the country needs is a question of, for different purposes, everybody needs to basically have those needs addressed. We need a broader definition of what constitutes that, and we need to re-examine how we address that need. So I think, for example, the notion that fiber to the home for every building, that was a mistake, and the movement to more flexible usage of the funds and more encompassing view of the technologies, of which fiber will still be really important. So that deeper prioritization of fiber as a solution, that's a good move, and that makes sense. And I think the same thing's true if you go back to the railroad thing and you think about how we've thought about railroads, and we've thought about with the rise of cars and trucks and containerization, the trucking industry. I think that we missed an opportunity to have a better railroad infrastructure in this country, and now that is a real problem for getting to high-speed radio trains. That's a more complicated argument, but it says that no single solution is the right one. And that's sort of, I think, one of the most important messages to get from this.
Our founding fathers built a system legislatively called the Senate, and the Senate gave 2 senators to every state. And that was a recognition that urban versus rural America might be a problem one day. And so as long as there is still a system of 2 senators for every state, I would say rural America will be well represented.
Dan Grossman continues to ask, saying, I haven't heard any examples of applications that can possibly use more than tens of megabits. Does anyone want to differ with that?
I think we're using more than tens of megabits right now.
Yeah.
Please elaborate. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, faster, first of all, faster than real-time delivery is a key way in which you can deal with fluctuations or disconnections or whatever. So, and there are lots of people who do it. So basically, most of the internet apps deal with that. That was one of the things that the cable networks do. They burst above your tiered service so that they can clear it, because the available capacity is a renewable resource. So the way TCP, the way the internet works, is it ramps up the bandwidth to fill the pipe if it can, and that's the right way to design applications. So having the gigabit there has already had significant effects in how other components or elements of the network were built. If we don't need to do as much compression or as we used to do video, and we can do higher things, and we've been able to step up, and that's because the gigabit networks are shared. Also, the gigabit infrastructure can allow you to have multiple service providers, each offering a service that's well below, so they're sharing it. So
well, and I referenced this article from 10 and a half years ago that I wrote that featured Dr. Reichert. It's called How to Find the New Light Bulb, or it was about light bulbs kind of playing off US Ignites. And I this is 10 years ago, where I talked about the ways gigabit technology was changing. One example came from a BYU graduate who's CEO of a genomics company in Provo, that said it used to take me days to download the genome from the lab before I could even start to analyze it. Now he downloads it now, meaning 10 and a half years ago, he downloads it in half an hour, right? So how has that played out over the last 10 years or so, Glenn? Like, how have you seen the just everyday use of gigabits? And from your presentation, like, the average is now more than 500 megabits, more than half a gigabit. That's pretty amazing. What does that say to the killer apps of these gigabit technology?
I think it's a real testament to how we've been able to bring down the cost of a gigabit and a terabit over time. People are willing to spend a certain amount of money, and they appreciate the additional speed, the additional clarity. They're going to buy a 4K television. They're going to go and they have kids that they're afraid will not have access to the school materials they need unless they get the bandwidth that they need. I think all of these are driving that kind of and even comparing to the neighbors. If the neighbors have it and they really love it, then why aren't we doing it as well? I think all of those things are helping to create the kind of demand that we need. Take Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio, what had been a couple of years ago the least connected big city in America. And US Ignite worked with them to go install wireless in this case, because that could be deployed fairly quickly, so that now everybody in the city of Cleveland, Ohio, can, for $18 a month, get a high-speed half a gigabit service wirelessly to their home. And we find that the impact is great. US Ignite had a grant from the National Science Foundation to measure the impact of having the gigabit in the home. And the answer was it made a substantial difference in the jobs that the people in that household could hold, to the educational opportunities and successes that they had there, to their health. People were looking up things on their health and were able to go and have better health records because of that. And all of these were due to the fact that it was an A-B situation where one group of people had the connection, the other group of people did not yet have the connection.
So we are running to the end of our time, and I wish we could get more. I think we're kind of getting on a roll finally, but I would going to give everyone a kind of final 30 seconds to 45-second closing comment. I would love to hear more about what we are getting. A great question on Zoom from Scott Foster, who highlights intelligent infrastructure, drones, LiDAR, fire detections. What kind of final thoughts would each of you offer? And we'll go in the same order we did the presentation. We'll have Glenn last since he was last. Could you just speak to how gigabit speeds matter or don't matter? And what are some of the things you're looking to in the next 3 to 5 years from advanced technology, advanced communications technology? Jimmy, what are your final thoughts here for our discussion?
And again, I highlight you, Drew, and Broadband Breakfast for giving us all this opportunity. So yesterday, former Arizona Republican House Speaker Rusty Bowers was on NPR in Phoenix. And Mr. Bowers said, in a political context, speed and volume don't make truth. Analogizing that in a political context to the discussion we're talking about here today, there is some relevance to our broadband context. Again, slightly restated, in every deployment, speed and volume do not mean truth. And I guess my bottom line is innovation will bring that truth.
Okay. Thanks for being with us, Jimmy. Bob, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just want to leave with the theme about rural. Really resonates with me. I started working on this for a long time. I really want to see rural communities get fiber. And, with AI really taking off, it needs fiber, right? So these data centers all need fiber. They're being built now in rural areas because they need access to power and space, and they need that fiber infrastructure. How do we get the communities and these data center providers together to make sure that we can accelerate last mile connectivity in those communities?
Yeah. We didn't talk quite as much as I would have liked about data centers and connectivity and latency, but another day, Bob. Thanks for being with us and spending this time with us. Bill.
I would just say gigabit is clearly really, really important, but it's, who, what, where, and it's not the only thing we should be concerned about. So let me leave it at that.
All right, Glenn.
Well, I agree with that. That's not the only thing we should be concerned about, but it is being a significant driver of the economy, of how people interact in this economy, how they learn, how they do their jobs. And I think for that reason, it's become a really integral part of taking America forward.
Well, thank you for that last word. We're really excited to have had each of you. As you know, we are here every Wednesday at 12 noon. You can look forward to a discussion next week on libraries, schools, and telehealth, how anchor institutions bridge gaps, and the following week on Europe's broadband and tech environment. On behalf of our panelists, Jimmy Schaeffler, Bob Whitman, Bill Lair, and Glenn Reichert, I'm Drew Clark.